Welcome back, everyone, this week to the Cart Barn Podcast. I'm Chris Limley, joined by Greg DeWalt. And Greg, the weather is finally starting to break. The temperatures are warming up. I've got the shorts all out and um, ready to go play some golf. How about you?
If you know me, I've always got the shorts out.
That's
I
true.
only maybe it's because I can't get into my long breeches. I'm not sure, but no, things are starting to green up. You can tell the weather's warming up. The ball's going a little bit further when I hit balls. So I'm ready for it to be 90 degrees and out there with the fairways going running firm and fast and the greens running fast and I'm ready to go. It's been a
Yeah,
long winter.
it has been. As we're recording this, it's a really sunny, nice, beautiful day, and the not a lot of clouds in the skies, and it's just it's springtime is here, and what springtime also means Augusta. And
That's
that's always when things kind of seem to kick off in the golf world.
That's kind of the unofficial, official start of golf season for most people. Even up north, things are starting to warm up a little bit, and so everybody just when they see that, they're ready to get out and play. Even people who play once a year, they're ready to get out, play
That's
that one round.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's dive into this week's podcast. We've got a name that very few people in the state know, and he's not from here, but he had an impact on the state and the golf scene because he was one of the architects involved in the RTJ Trail, John Harvey.
Yeah, John Harvey's an interesting story. He was working for Robert Trent Jones back when this whole idea of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail came to fruition. He and Roger Rulewich. Roger Rulewich was the chief designer on all the courses, and John Harvey was working hand in hand on the original four that opened. And he was boots on the ground. He was there making site visits right along. Hanging out, watching the whole thing develop. So we thought it'd be interesting for our listeners to get to know one of the guys who was right there, had a very big impact on the architecture, the design, and the implementation of what has become the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail, which anybody who knows anything about golf, it was a unique construction project, the largest construction project of its kind, and it'll never be emulated simply because the land mass that it took, the sites, and you looking back now, it's amazing to see that they got it done uh, pretty much on time and how it evolved. And I think everybody's going to enjoy listening to John and talk about his time in Alabama. He's currently in Michigan. He's got his own design firm now. And he, like I say, worked hand in hand with Roger Rulewich and Robert Trent Jones on how this whole thing evolved.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this week's podcast with John Harvey. Welcome back to the Cart Barn. Today we're excited to have John Harvey join the podcast. John is a golf course architect and was instrumental in several of the Robert Trent Jones courses here in Alabama, as well as numerous design projects around the country and the world. John, welcome to the Cart Barn Podcast.
Glad to be here, Chris and Greg. I appreciate the opportunity to chip in, so to speak, and talk a little bit about the trail.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, here in Alabama, it's just been a gold mine for not only tourism but the golf, and really kind of put Alabama in a new light, I think, around the country. And you were a part of it from the ground level. You had boots on the ground during the construction process.
Is it safe to say that there'll never be another project like the RTJ Golf Trail at one time?
Well, never certainly is a qualifying word. I would say I'd put my money on it, though, that there will not be another massive scale project like this, especially when you talk about what the first phase entailed and the second phase of totaling 324 golf holes in essentially 2.5 to 3 years. Phenomenal venture, and there's many people that are to credit for that, and some of which we can talk about, and I have by name, certainly Roger Ruwich, and chief designer with Mr. Jones. And it was just an awesome, life-changing experience for me to play a small role in that work.
You were a young pup, pretty much just getting started with your career when you got thrown into it. A lot of pressure there.
No question, no question about it. And so I started out in the summer of 1988 after Michigan State University with a BLA in landscape architecture, and met up with Mr. Jones and at the time Jim Singerling at the Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts, and that was during the U.S. Open. And a couple weeks later, long story short, a couple weeks later, I found myself moving to Montclair, New Jersey, and working with Roger out of the design studio there. And at that time, Mr. Jones was back and forth from Coral Ridge Country Club, where he had an apartment and certainly ownership there in Fort Lauderdale, and then back to his house in Montclair. So he was back and forth on a number of occasions with flights and site visits and so forth. But it was an awesome experience. And like I say, Roger, very quiet, unassuming, never wanted to be in the focus or never tried to be in the limelight, but was there behind Mr. Jones, and I always called Mr. Jones. It wasn't Trent. It wasn't Bob. It wasn't anything like that. The only one that I'd ever hear refer to Mr. Jones as Trent was Red Hoffman, and you may know that name in the past as a great golf writer, and contributed to the sport immensely with his not only his encyclopedic knowledge of the game, but of events, of tournaments, of players. And Mr. Jones was along that same line. He could recall and recant stories of events and players and the weather during the final round and who was tied and who was under par and where the situations were and the dynamics of play. So very incredible experience too. And Red Hoffman, Arthur was his first name, but went by red hair. When he had hair, he worked in the office too in Montclair, and just to be around he and Roger and Mr. Jones to assimilate that the wealth of knowledge and experience and work on the drafting boards for Roger, and Mr. Jones was the routing and was incredible behind the scenes. And then where the magic takes place, to be out there, as you say, Greg, with boots on the ground. We would walk and flag and do first phase of clearing, and then second phase with Phillips and Jordan out of Knoxville and Zephyr Hills, Florida. They were incredible with the amount of machines and heavy iron on properties, and some of these properties were very complex, not only with landforms, but with streams and lakefronts, and really just a challenge sometimes to walk through, and how heavy cover they were. And even with Greenbrier, I remember the thorny briar and primarily in Birmingham. So it was amazing stories, and like I say, beautiful to play a small part of not only some of the just cutting my teeth with Roger and listening to him and walking with he and Bobby and the people like Neil Frazier, who between Roger and Neil developed a great relationship with Bobby, and conversely with Bobby and Dr. Bronner, who spearheaded the entire RSA RTJ trail. It was incredible to see it unfold, and like I say, play a small part.
It kind of had to be overwhelming when you guys get the project. Hey, we're going to build all these courses at one time. You know, it wasn't okay, we'll open this one in 92, well, this one opened in 93, and this one, it was all at once going on at various sites. And how even for Roger, how overwhelming was it to get this going and finished?
Well, most of these, I'm not sure if you're aware of this process, the part of this story. Many of those golf courses were nothing more than a route plan. There weren't cut and fill documents. There weren't irrigation drawings ahead of time. There weren't grass lines. There weren't greens, tees, and bunkers in detail and sketched out, and like I say, grading plans and drainage plans or tree clearing plans. Essentially, the route plans were surveyed in the field, sometimes even hand staked just by metes and bounds and a compass, trying to figure out lengths and widths. And but ahead of time, there was an agreement of, okay, with Phillips and Jordan doing the heavy lifting with earthwork and at the time Florida Golf, the construction arm on under Robert Trent Jones, part of Robert Trent Jones companies, where P&J would be involved in their contract with the tree clearing and the mass excavation. So pond excavation, cuts and fills, scraper work with cuts and fills, given particular terrain and soils, and then heavy pushing with D10s and D9s, and just incredible, as you say, massive scale. But prior to that, there was a decision made on, okay, this particular site, we're moving X cubic yards. Greens might be 7,000 square feet in total on average. Tees could be 9,000 to 10,000 square feet on average, tee tops. And then bunkers would have a square footage relationship. So there was a budget, per se, as I recall, for each project, and some might be a little different depending on the existing terrain and the type of lagoons or water bodies being created. So there was a frame of reference in terms of a budget, but to blow and go with the type and the scale and the scattering around the state, quite often we were driving, spending a couple days in one location, driving during the night to the next, finding a hotel to stay at, and then arriving in the morning, doing the work on the next project. So it was fast and furious, no doubt. But I think Roger, I bet he was back and forth, if not every week for a couple days, every other week, and sometimes for weeks at a time. And I would follow up, again, like I say, sometimes walk through with Bobby and Roger, and then occasionally Mr. Jones would make visits too, and primarily would be flown around with P&J's helicopter with Ben Turner. And I remember flying with him once too, and then meeting with various site representatives. So on each project site, we had a supervisor with Florida Golf. And that supervisor was also a shaper, project coordinator, and would physically do much of the shaping himself, and would have other shapers and specialized trained people underneath them working fast and furious on projects.
John,
what projects
of the different courses, what projects were you specifically working on?
I was involved with what we called really the first phase and second phase. The first phase was the 4 54-hole projects, and that was Grand National, the Birmingham, Oxmoor Valley, and Hampton Cove and Magnolia Grove. So those were the big first push, and then the others were Gadsden, Dothan, and Greenville. So some I spent more time with than others, but from the tree clearing, and then some of reviewing shaping, and even early on, Roger said, "Hey, why don't you look at providing doing some bunker sketches and green sketches and run them by me?" And we would kind of go back and forth and noodle on some of those, and then see them take place and shape in the field. And so that was a a great project where Roger encouraged me and nurtured me to think outside of the sandbox and look at spectacular opportunities, and just to be around with him, as wise and professorial as he is, and studious as he is, and he would quite often, you could see him thinking and tinkering in his mind, the gears churning, and he'd have his pipe and he'd just puff on it a little bit, and you could say, okay, well, let's try this and we'll do this, and the interchange back and forth with our shapers and the key people was incredible. That design input back and forth from feedback and resolving. But that interchange was incredible and part of the design process. And I realized early on, and I had a chance to get up on I hadn't operated a dozer before, but to get up on a D6 and a D4 in Alabama and realize that, yeah, I was pretty good at making washboards, but I that I learned an inordinate amount of respect for people that we had on staff, that Roger and Mr. Jones had on staff, that were shapers and supervisors and seasoned professionals in their craft of essentially surgeons on a dozer. Like I say, it was amazing to see the talent behind the machines.
How did the routing? Because I've played every course on the trail, and there's very few holes that are similar in design. To be doing that many courses at one time, you would think there'd be some duplicity in the routing, but there really wasn't. How difficult was that to create a different hole, different 18, different 54 across the trail?
Well, there's a little story to that too, and I recall Roger and Bobby had the idea to try to replicate a green on, at least on the first phase. It was a par 3 green, on each of the, at least on one course on each of the 54 on a par 3 green, and as much as they tried, really couldn't do it. And I think that was it, kind of dovetailing on what you're describing. A lot of it was just the what the land would reveal, and the fact that the bandwidth of Roger's creativity and the team that was assembled, and Mr. Jones's thought process of bringing this to fruition, and being politely encouraged by Bobby Vaughn to really just go to the limits. And as you could see, even to this day, sometimes those limits even meant the limits of the topographic slope between pinning areas and the severity of some of the greens. So that was, I think that interface between Bobby and Roger, and then our design team and construction team was out of the park. But like you have laid testimony to, there's some unbelievable contouring on the greens.
I think, was that kind of mandated by Dr. Bronner? He wanted hard golf courses. As I recall, he basically said he got the inspiration from PGA West, where people were lining up to pay money to play the hardest golf course they would ever play and go back home and tell their friends. So how challenging was it, or was it almost over the top hard to create those greens complexes?
Well, I guess if you look at the entire golf holes, from the tips and then everything in between and forward, there's quite an enormous variety of yardages, and really wanted to cater to golf to anybody and everybody. Challenge the world's best, but also provide enjoyment and challenge of people just trying to get the ball off the tee and have fun moving the ball forward at a beginner or a lesser golfer level. So fun, provide the fun, provide amazing views, amazing challenge, but also the optics of golf, as we all know, how important that is to tell the story. And one of Mr. Jones's, and by virtue, Roger, their design philosophy is what you see is what you get. So present that to the player from the tee, for the most part, and from landing areas, and kind of tell the story and let the golfer make up their own story. But try to provide some comfort, some bailout, but also an inordinate challenge if you and penalty if you to pay the price if you don't hit the right shot.
The routing, to me that's always been fascinating. How designers can take a blank canvas and route a golf course, but you guys weren't just routing one course. You were routing two courses and a short course on a finite property. How difficult was that?
Well, one point here, I've had through my career, a number of golf architects, ASGCA members, in conversation, such as Reese Jones, say that, John, Roger is the best in designing and routing a golf course. And I think that's testimony and tantamount to Roger's background as a civil engineer, graduate of Yale. He would bring cuts and fills into his mind as he's looking at the terrain and as he's routing the golf course, and bringing that sort of mentality into grading and shaping as he's just laying it out. And so that's really, I think, a special gift that Roger developed, and even with training with Mr. Jones, the two of them, and then Roger being able to just bolster that training in-house with his educational background and experience, more and more through his 34 years while working with Mr. Jones. But it's really, it's kind of what the land tells you when you have something to work with that does have terrains and humps and bumps and valleys and hollows. Par threes are always the easiest to find, Roger would tell me. And Jones would say, well, there's nothing straight in golf, John. So there are a lot of different factors that would come together. But one thing that really Roger impressed upon me, and I could see it on every project, whether it was Grand Dunes in Myrtle Beach, or Saratoga National in New York State, or Anglebrook, as I alluded to, in New York as well, Ballyonne in New Jersey, is that you try to work with the land, listen to the land, sometime creating the land, and making the connections, trying to have convenient connections from green to tee to the next hole, instead of back walking or forward walking. Try to encourage walking, but certainly carts is part of a revenue stream, and sometimes is an essential or the only way to make connection from hole to hole. But the important consideration of not only a single hole, but how it relates to a patchwork or a quilt of golf holes.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I kind of think what you're saying is that not all land is created equal. Some are just a little bit better suited for a golf course than others. That being the case, one of the ones that you worked on the trail was the easiest and most fun, and which one had the most challenge?
Good one. Well, I know that Mr. Jones felt that Grand National was his favorite out of all of them, and I think even as Dr. Bronner had said, that how can you choose your favorite child out of all the different golf courses and all the different sites? But when you have the element of water, whether you have a golf hole right on water or a forced carry or alongside, but just the optics of terrain with the distance view, and that's sort of a Japanese design principle of a borrowed landscape in the background or in the distant view. That creates an enormous, even from a clubhouse, the views, the ambiance of the location. So I would say, and that would be for a number of reasons. It would be Grand National, right on a drinking water reservoir, and the testing that took place, baseline testing from the environmental standpoint of the water quality beforehand, during construction, and afterwards. And that Gulf is a really good steward of the environment, which resonates to me and resonates to tread lightly on the landscape, even though you might be making several million yards of cuts and fills. It's sort of an overall picture to me in the layout of that particular project, and how it all comes together, and the memorabilia, the memorable actually of one whole to the other in the overall experience. And that, for me and for everybody that worked on the projects, there's a lot of stories out there, and actually being out on a particular green site or a particular hole kind of brings back those thoughts and dialogue of challenges we were tackling and then opportunities we were embracing.
Did you realize at the time the scope of what you guys were creating for a young guy, or was it, hey, this is just another day at the office?
That's a great question, Greg. I didn't know what to think, frankly. I can't say that I thought, well, everybody else is doing it, nothing new, but I felt that this is different. This is big. And the more I would listen and learn and traverse the state, we thought, Roger, speaking for Roger for a minute, I remember conversations, Alabama, well, that's a pretty flat state, right? And it was such an eye-opening, and just like Mike before being to Iowa, I thought, wow, Iowa's a flat state too, but maybe in some locations, like some locations in Alabama, but how diverse the state of Alabama is in complexion and attitude of the landscape, and vegetative patterns and terrain and soils. A lot of red clay, I know, but really the versatile components of the landscape and the terrain, geology, and as I say, vegetation. That was impressive to look at. Little different nuances, and in some cases significant nuances from one site to another.
Gosh, that's fascinating. You think about Oxmoor. There, if there's any flat spots there, I haven't found them.
Well, that brings in mind a little story. When we were doing rough grading, I don't remember the whole number, it quit, and it was a time, I think I was back to the office in Montclair, and Roger was probably overnighting in a hotel and maybe on to another site. But there were dozers on a par 3 that was a par 4 rather, playing uphill. And alongside the hole, I believe it was on the right-hand side, was a significant gas main in the ground. And during the evening, somebody not related to the project got on the dozer and dug into the ground, and the dozer the next morning was running, and the blade of the dozer was damn near that pipeline that had been exposed by whoever was on that equipment, and it was still idling, and the blade was right close to that force main. And fortunately, nothing happened, but I remember that put a temporary pause on construction with the overall, whoever owned and whoever oversaw the safety components of that gas line company. So that was a pretty scary situation that really could have caused some problems. But underneath that golf course, there are a series of mine shafts, and I believe it was iron ore that they were mining, but I don't quite recall. You guys may know Oxmoor Valley. And that was the irrigation source to tap into with a well down into because the mine shafts were flooded. So that serves, and maybe still serves today, as the irrigation source for that property.
I didn't have a clue about that.
And I know sometimes I'm getting off tangent a little bit, but if you say a key word or something, it brings back certain ideas and certain memories. So I'll try to stay on the rails a little bit.
No, that was great.
So the project, that was extremely late in Mr. Jones' career. He didn't make many site visits, did he, if any? And it was mostly just Roger communicating with him?
Correct. At certain pivotal times, perhaps a meeting with Dr. Bronner, Bobby Vaughn, and then a few site visits. Sometimes, like as I said, with Phillips and Jordan's helicopter, he would make several site visits, photo ops, but also you could see Mr. Jones out there and looking at things and nodding his approval, and his smile was from ear to ear, and was quite you could see he was impressed with the work, and would relay certain ideas to Roger. But yeah, for the most part, it was a kind of cameo visits and photo opportunities and speaking sound bites, and it was really quite spectacular. And I know Roger and Mr. Jones would talk quite often about the process and some of the design elements.
I remember talking with Roger back 2012, 2013. The projects were moving so fast that sometimes Mr. Jones would make a suggestion about a green or something, and that green was already built, and they'd moved on, just because of where he was at in his career, and he wasn't on site a lot. But it was, some of those changes didn't get made because the construction was already complete.
Yeah, that's quite possible. But I think the enthusiasm and the spirit of that conversation, that dialogue between Roger and Mr. Jones was there, and in the feedback and in some of the design philosophy and discussion. But yeah, there's no doubt that took place. But yeah, just the process seemed overwhelming at times. I remember on one particular instance, I don't know what project, but Roger had developed the route plan. I had drafted it up with by hand and put some color on it with marker. We put it in a FedEx triangular tube, sent it down to Bobby. He couldn't find it. It didn't arrive. Sent it FedEx, as I said. And he called FedEx, said, "Hey, I'm expecting this delivery. We don't have this. We need it today because we're staking this golf course." So he met with FedEx, went into the belly of the plane, and found the tube amidst some other packages. But that story is one to when you do have that opportunity to chat with Bobby and Roger. That's an amazing little story about how fast what was used and how fast the process was moving. Of where's the route plan? Where's my route plan?
Wow.
I can't imagine the permitting for all these sites was easy, or maybe it was. Maybe Dr. Bronner had enough influence that the permitting was didn't take a long time.
That's possible. Some sites were more complex with Army Corps regulated wetlands and water bodies. In quite a few areas, we had bridges being built as causeways from one side of the property to the other, or from tee to green. In some cases, these causeway wood bridge structures were a two-way, two directions, serving multiple holes. While some might be very short, some were very long, and I think the bridges in Dothan were some of the longest ones that I recall. And again, they were built from the decking forward, so built from the top moving forward with pile drivers and certainly skilled craftsmen and carpenters building these bridges. And I'm sure by now they've updated and having to replace some decking and so forth after, in some cases, 30 years. So, yeah, just some amazing different craftsmen and builders, and from cart paths. You think about the miles and miles of cart path that are installed, and in most, I think 100% of the cases, concrete slip form with fiber mesh, but just miles and miles of 8-foot wide cart path.
I know lots of times when I'm playing one of my buddies, I'll say, I wished I'd had the concrete contract for that.
Sure.
I have several homes in different locations if I had.
Yeah, no question. One particular project, thinking, just again, my gears are churning, in Huntsville. The lower course was built in an area that was prone to flooding, and I think at the time it was both cotton field and maybe even some soybean. So
Yeah.
we didn't want to construct and build any bunker features because of the inundation of silt and sediment and the constant aggravation of having to strip the sand out and install new bunker sand. So that was all third dimension grading, grass lines, color, and texture. And to be able to think about, I don't think Roger and Mr. Jones had ever done a course without bunkers, but that was quite a challenge in itself. And I remember going from that course and then to the more housing, in some cases housing, on the other 18. I remember standing on the tee one time, just thinking on the first hole, thinking, boy, someday this is going to be shingle links. You know, you're going to see all the shingles on one side, and then the golf holes. And then thinking about the lower course with no sand and no houses, just kind of the diversity from one course to the other, and that was one of the drivers, if you will, with the golf courses, is that Dr. Bronner, Bobby, and Roger certainly didn't want to have houses infringing too close to the golf holes and overwhelming the pictorial, the visual qualities of golf, or from that standpoint, the safety. So corridors were very wide and very generous. And that's also a reflection, if you look at Grand Dunes, the resort course in Myrtle Beach that Roger and I designed and built later. And I just recently renovated it with the Founders Group, who now owns the property. But the point is that the corridors are very comfortable, very wide, and housing might be there, golf is there, and there's a good relationship versus holes that are just, and houses that are just right on the property line and right on golf. We've seen those courses before. We've played those courses, and it's sometimes they can be at defeating ends of, golf and then housing. And as I said, the safety component of golf is very on the top, one of the top elements of considering the balance of when you have housing with golf.
Yeah, that one of the fascinating things to me. And if you haven't been back to Hampton Cove, you wouldn't believe how that's sprung up in its own community out there. It's a whole new town out there. They've got a school, they've got shopping and all that, which is different from most of the other sites when it comes to the bordering neighborhoods. There's not a lot, but you guys really didn't have constraints as far as what the developer wanted for houses and what you wanted for the golf courses at that time, which from a design aspect has got to be pretty good.
No question. No question. We knew in some of the properties, excuse me, that would eventually, these areas would be built out. But so we had to strike some D lines, some development lines, and carve it around, and then road crossings at some locations. So it was an amazing master planning process, some more than others, but that's all what they were. They were, as I mentioned earlier, a plan, a stick drawing with bunkers and greens and tees as a concept. But the magic, the fun, the extravagance really took place out on a golf course, and with that the creative flow between the entire team that was assembled, and Bobby keeping everybody on track and reporting back to Dr. Bronner on a regular basis, and just that the train of work and the the rapidness, while still you had the quality, but you also had the quantity, and then that time frame. So kind of backtracking a little bit to Anglebrook, as I mentioned previously, in Lincolndale, New York. That was an 18-hole golf course that was planned on a property that had Army Corps, New York State DEC, and local wetland jurisdiction lines, all on this 210-acre, 205-acre property. Beautiful piece of property. And it was a Catholic school for boys at one time, the property. And that was a farmland, and the school still is across the street. But it was farm. And you could see through successional growth, it was just overcoming some of these previously tilled areas. There were wooded areas, but interlaced with some significant wetlands. So when we were talking, Roger and I, when we were talking about this project with Bobby, and we were 3 years in to the permitting process in New York State on this project, and he goes, we're going to build all these golf holes before you even start. And doggone it, he was right. But and then later, after that course was built, Anglebrook Golf Club, which I've just recently been hired to help them out with some specific renovations to their practice facilities, which is a treat to be called back by any client to continue work. Roger had made mention to me. He goes, John, with as challenging of a project as Anglebrook was, looking back at it now, you think you'd ever want to do that? And I said, Roger, I learned so much, both at the same time on the trail in Alabama, as well as other projects taking place, from the process of construction, design, and build. However, I've also learned so much with the permitting and the negotiation and working with multidisciplines of both agronomists, writing the integrated turfgrass management program just for the approvals, and then working with ecological consultants and wetlands consultants. And Robert A.M. Stern out of New York City did the clubhouse design work, well-noted international golf course, architectural firm, and then Dibney Consulting, the engineering and landscape architecture planning company. So it was two different polar opposite projects, but they were both great learning experiences for me as I said before, cutting my teeth with Roger and Mr. Jones.
When you mentioned agronomy, it brought up a question.
How did y'all decide what grasses for the greens? Because Alabama's not the easiest place to decide which grass you want on your greens, whether it's bent or Bermuda, just given the extreme climate differences.
Yeah, from one end of the state to the other.
And then when we didn't have all these different strains of Bermuda and bent at that time, so if you could explain that process, that would be nice.
Well, as I recall, Bobby and Roger, certainly Bobby had some ideas, Roger did too, but I believe they leaned heavily on the grow-in superintendents that were hired. And in many cases, they were there ahead of time, before construction or during construction. So some of those decisions were, well, if you say made on the fly, but they were educated choices, professional choices made during the process. And some were even made before the process. So, and perhaps even, I'm sure since then, some have been converted to ultra dwarfs and to better strains of bent grass. So that's my recollection of how that took place.
When you look back, how getting the trail on your resume, how did it springboard your career afterwards?
Well, I think a couple elements. Part of what we do, I think, no matter walk and journey in life, has to do with absorbing things like a sponge, actually being physically involved, mentally involved, and then by that making some choices and learning from maybe some decisions that may not have been the best, but they were decisions at the time. But gaining the confidence of your work through time, that's important. And that, I think, as a springboard from being competent and confident in that work moving forward was helpful. And in that, as I mentioned as well, the variety of experience from extensive environmental complications and negotiations with a project such as Anglebrook, and to some extent too on the trail, but just the scale and complexity of the amount of earthwork and dirt being moved in such a short time frame. Looking back, the Tale of Two Worlds was a great educator for me. And I try to, on my projects that I work on today, when I wear my design hat, because I also work with a company based in Michigan called Porous Pave that provides permeable pavement and bunker liners for the golf industry and other industries, made out of recycled tires, a stone aggregate, and a binder. So it really gave me, with the design and with current projects, just that opportunity to work as a team, that I don't know it all, never profess to know everything, but the best projects come together when you have people that you work well with, have similar ideas, and sometimes even nebulous ideas that come up or crop up during a project may lead to something that's an offshoot from a crazy idea that's noteworthy. Sometimes on mostly renovation work that I work on today, herding the cats on a committee, and when you have a number of people on a site walk, a dozen, it's hard to keep people on the same page when there's sidebars going on and different conversations. But I think that the ability of an architect to listen, yet to guide, and sometimes certainly applaud great ideas, but in other times to say, hey, that's just not going to work here, and I wouldn't endorse that. And I think, from my experience, I think I've gained a little respect from some clients when I say in a soft way, because I don't try to be harsh at all. Roger taught me a lot of things, even just, as I say, by being around him. He was a gentle giant, and I may be gentle, but certainly no giant like him and Mr. Jones. So I just try to learn and work as a team on every project.
That's interesting because, I mean, we're all golf course architects at heart, right?
Sure.
And to be what I may think work could be completely out of the realm of possibility for you to kind of
Be wanting to get that job or that contract and telling a guy on the board, the club board, hey, that's crazy. You've got to kind of walk the middle ground there, right?
No question about it. And I've had a couple of projects where we've had a town hall meeting within the club, right? Giving a presentation on the master plan, walking through the presentation, describing the process, the methodology, the rationale. And some cases, no matter what you present, a change or an improvement, or you look at it from the monetary standpoint of funding it, you'll have naysayers and people that don't want to do anything. And I get it. But during the process, later on, even while renovations are taking place, and to have some of those members come up to you and say, hey, John, I was sitting in the back row and I totally against whatever you were talking about. I didn't follow it. I didn't understand it, or I did follow it and understand it. And I just didn't want to do anything. But I get it now. I see it and I believe it. And I like what's going on, and you have a good team here. So that's a testimony to trying to listen, to guide, and to make some good professional decisions.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say that may be a good segue too into obviously the purpose of this today's podcast was to talk about the RTJ Trail, but John, you've been involved with some golf courses around the country and the world that a lot of people have heard or heard of, played. For example, the Robert Trent Jones Golf Club in Virginia, Palmetto Dunes, John Forth there at Hilton Head, Celtic Manor in Wales. What am I missing? There's some more that I remember seeing.
Well, those are certainly ones that I have enjoyed working on, and some were very early on in my career, such as Celtic Manor and Adair Manor. Some of the more, the Palmetto Dunes renovation on Hilton Head, that was tee to green. It involved some significant elevation and some lagoon creation and excavation. Therefore, some retaining walls, wood retaining walls. We're trying to help drainage and to respect tidal influences, to contain some of the brackish and saltwater intrusion onto the property. All the greens were cored out and rebuilt, new fairway bunkers, new tees, and essentially every inch of that property was graded. We tried to respect as much as possible the existing irrigation. So, so that was a challenge. In some cases, obviously around a green or tee complex and fairway complex, you have to install and design new irrigation. But in terms of the main line and some of the fairway lateral heads, tried to work with the grading and make sure that drainage works, and it doesn't look too much like my grading shaping like a washboard. That's my aptitude of shaping. But so that was knowing the location, knowing the island and the subdued nature of driving through the island and seeing very little signage, and a lot of wonderful landscaping that sort of blocks commercial areas from transportation areas, and then being on one of the few golf courses that has oceanfront golf holes, was pretty spectacular. And that was offered some unique opportunities and some unique challenges too.
Well, you've been doing this for a while. What changes do you see uh, in the golf course architect business right now?
Well, I think they're the next man up, kind of like Izzo's basketball team at Michigan State. I'm a Michigan State guy. My daughter works for the athletic department, so as a third generation Spartan, so I relate quite a bit of my life bleeding green and white. But Izzo's basketball team, he has 10, 12 people that could start. So it's almost like a hockey change line where you have 5 new guys in, 5 guys out. So to that point and to that example, there are a lot of guys that are and gals that are coming into the profession that are developing their niche on golf course design and their process. Some are very detailed plan oriented, plans ahead of time, CAD drawings and photo simulations and detailed grading of existing or proposed conditions, and then physically performing some of the shaping themselves. So that's getting new spirit and new vitality into the industry, and younger members of the American Society of Golf Course Architects are applying. And there's some seasoned veterans that have applied recently and become members. So I think the technology component, the drones, we hear a lot about drones lately out east, but certainly from the technological standpoint of integrating that opportunity into property analysis and into design and into visual components during the design process is a great tool. So the technology is a big element in how that is being embraced by younger architects that are moving up through the ranks. So that's a big element there. And then if you look at the agronomic development through time with soils and with admixtures, different elements you can add into soil profile to help with that, with drainage and also moisture retention in some cases, and then availability of nutrients to the turf grass. That's incredible, and that certainly is part of due to funding with various companies and manufacturers and vendors, suppliers around the country, and also the USGA and Audubon International. So there's a lot of research that goes into it, and the cultivation and research that goes on through turfgrass and agronomic programs within various universities around the country. So it's kind of a multi-element that I see continuing, but also embraced by people coming up in the ranks.
I've heard one architect describe this age of golf architecture kind of as a new golden age, that in 100 years we'll be looking back on some of the courses and the designers that are working now, and this will be a golden age going forward. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do. If you look right around 08, 09, 10, with the economy and with the industry, and there was much less work going on, and it's been an ebb and flow through time. But that's an example of a snippet of time where perhaps work was down quite a bit, and then now with COVID and through COVID, post-COVID, of the encouragement of being outdoors, people rediscovering nature, rediscovering golf, and that entrance into golf and retainage of players that presently play is amazing to see. and even some private clubs that were designed through time to have 8,000 rounds, maybe up to 22, 24, 25,000 rounds. So they're kind of looking at that as how do we handle that kind of play. So that's great to see, and I see certainly strong movement and participation over the next several years. So from my walks and talks throughout the various projects and various industry trade shows and conferences where I meet and make new colleagues and friends, and that seems to be the talk, and I would agree with that. It's strong. Golf is strong.
Do you see a time or a coming era where more people are designing 9-hole courses, 12-hole courses, short courses going forward?
Well, that's a great point. Really a good point. And I think golf comes in many fashions and forms. And it may not be for everybody, but time, you think about how busy we are in our lives, the electronic age, the phones and computers and social media. And that's another element that more and more, I'm not as up on social media for a lot of different reasons. I'm primarily on LinkedIn. But social media is a big broadcast and great bandwidth for a number of different people that are looking at sports or analyzing sports, participate in sports. So that's a big outreach of, I think, telling the story of golf, telling the story of different projects that are out there, like 12, returning 6-hole links. So in doing things like that, people can get out there, enjoy the game with a variety of different players, and may not have to spend the 4 hours or the 5 hours out playing a quote-unquote traditional 18. So I grew up playing 9 holes, and that's what we did in high school golf. I enjoy 18 and still enjoy it today. But it's when I was raising 3 kids and my wife, who's a saint, I always felt that it was kind of challenged to get out and to spend that kind of time on a weekend away from the family. So I'm certainly in favor and think that that's a great way to diversify the playing fields and the opportunities of golf for anybody and everybody, is the variety of different venues.
Great. I think that's a good spot kind of to end the podcast. We certainly appreciate you taking an hour and so of your time to talk about the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail project. Having somebody who was literally walking the routing and cutting through the underbrush, and it's fascinating to me.
Well, it's looking back at it pretty special, and I'm very blessed to play a small role in that process and project. And there's many people that had much more involvement than I did, but it was enjoyable and very formative for me to play a role, and it was fun. At the end of the day, everything we do in this industry should be fun, especially getting out there and playing golf with our buddies and experiencing the wonderful game. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Greg and Chris, and thank you.
Did you come away with a new appreciation for Southern barbecue during your time down there?
Oh boy, I'm a foodie, so yeah, that we could do another podcast on that. But I certainly did, and I probably put on a few pounds during that during the work down there. But yeah, I love barbecue, Southern hospitality, and Southern cooking. So you guys live in a prized part of the country, and just a great place to be back. I got to get back again soon. So you're kind of priming the pump for me to make a trip down to the heart of Dixie State.
That'd be great. We'd love to have you down, John.
Thanks again for taking some time
to visit with us today. It's been a pleasure getting to hear some of your stories, and look forward to continuing the conversation again at some point in the future.
Sounds good. And again, as we talked prior, happy to try to help out the best I can, put you in touch with some of the game players out on the projects.
Thanks, John. So we want to thank John Harvey for taking some time out of his busy schedule up in Michigan, where when we talked to him, it was snow on the ground, so it probably didn't take too much of his time away from him. He wasn't out there mapping out routing courses. So, but we thank him for sharing his stories of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail and how it came to be.
Yeah, great storyteller, interesting guy. I'd like to have him back on, and you and I are working to get some other members of the design team that were involved in this on the podcast. So hopefully that will come to fruition as well. But thanks again for listening. Hope you're continuing to enjoy the stuff that Greg and I are trying to put out there for you. And again, you can catch us wherever you get your podcast and certainly on YouTube. Thanks again for listening to the Cart Barn Podcast.